we're skipping stuff. Anyway. Who am I fighting? What's going on? Where's the enemy? These guys? What is this? Can I just like end turn for everyone? Apparently we found the combat. What? Wait, what? I don't know what the fuck you call this type of thing. Dude, what? This guy just made like 3 games on Virtual Boy as their first creations. It's really weird. Man, what a weird fucking game this is. I don't even know what to say. Give the spear on this. There's a fan translation? Where? I didn't see it. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, Stage 4, Stage 5, Stage 6, Stage 7. So there's 8 stages in this game. I guess we'll just continue with it. I didn't really know there was a fan translation. I had a feeling though. You can probably handle it without fan translation. What's happening?
Gundam? I barely know him. It's Virtual Boy Works episode 20. In case you weren't certain just how ubiquitous Gundam games are in Japan, here you go. There was exactly one licensed media property to appear on Virtual Boy in Japan, and it was Gundam. America got Waterworld, and I suppose Nestor, but Japan got Gundam. Honestly, the US got the better deal. Waterworld was a flawed and seemingly incomplete game, but it's not terrible. In fact, it's totally playable. SD Gundam Dimension War is not. This should come as no real surprise if you've been following Game Boy Works. Anytime a Gundam game shows up, it's just pure misery. Portable systems like Game Boy and Virtual Boy don't even get the luxury of real Gundam games. Instead, it's always spin-offs based on SD Gundam, the goofy-looking cartoon interpretation of the giant mech war opera franchise. And that's just what we have here. No Char Aznable, no Amuro.
20 minutes? Shit, it's right. It's correct. Man, what is SD Gundam? What even is it? Put on my plan to watch.
Ray, no Bright Noah, not even Duo Maxwell, just bobble-headed robots who fight a lot. They don't even fight well. Dimension War has what might honestly be the absolute worst action scenes on Virtual Boy. It is to action games what Virtual Lab is to puzzle games. Well, okay, maybe it's not that bad, but it sure ain't great. To Dimension War's credit, this is at least just plain old SD Gundam, as opposed to the spin-offs of spin-offs we've seen on Game Boy. This isn't about samurai robots in feudal Japan, and it's not about robots fighting robo-goblins in some sort of Dragon Quest pastiche. Instead, this is more of a generic riff on the Gundam franchise, in which a number of the brand's trademark mech suits face off in a watered-down strategy format. All in squatty cartoon form, of course. In a lot of ways, the game bears a strong similarity to Game Boy's first Gundam title, SD Sengokuden Kunitori Monogatari. The larger aspect of the game consists of advancing around a grid-based map and trying to maneuver around the enemy's mechs. Civilization 6, this is not. It's a far more basic kind of tactical design, where there's very little actual depth to the gameplay. Positioning doesn't really have any impact on the action compared to something like Final Fantasy Tactics. There's only robots smashing into other robots on a grid in space. When two units collide on the map, you switch to an encounter mode, just like in, say, Shining Force or Advance Wars. But boy howdy, this is a far cry from those games. Battles in Dimension War somehow managed to be even worse than the idiotic button mashing in SD Sengokuden, which itself was the very definition of an idiotic button mashy game. At least SD Sengokuden took place in a simple two-dimensional plane. Dimension War amplifies its badness by throwing things onto a z-axis, as implied by the title. It's wretched, mindless action that's also incredibly clumsy and difficult, due to the fact that the wretched, mindless action spans across the foreground and background. Basically what happens is that you have two combat choices when you move around the map. If you end up a few spaces away from a foe, you can attack them remotely with the indirect attack option and deal a small amount of damage with no fear of retaliation. Indirect combat can be mildly helpful, but your output and impact here really amount to chip damage. It would take ages to win a battle this way, and there's no way the enemy will just sit around and wait for you to whittle down their health from a distance. No matter what you do, the computer is going to close in on you and challenge you to the other attack mode, direct combat. You can choose to activate Ambush, a sort of Overwatch mode that allows you to get a slight jump on bad guys, but even then, everything ultimately comes down to head-to-head battles. When you face off against an enemy mobile suit, you attack in two phases. First, you approach the enemies in a sort of over-the-shoulder viewpoint in which you're given about 10 seconds to pepper your opponent with cannon fire as you streak toward them through space. This phase doesn't really amount to much. It's basically just an excuse to show off a warp speed star effect that attempts to show off the system's 3D effects, but does such a pitiful job of it with such ugly graphics that it fails to impress in any sense. Once you muddle through this sequence, you switch over to a one-on-one combat mode that resembles the one in SD Sengokuden, with a few differences. The first difference is that you're in space rather than on the ground, which means you can fly around rather than having to jump. The other difference is what makes this whole thing so awful. You can move into and out of the foreground by hitting the controller's shoulder buttons, and so can the bad guy. This makes combat an absolute chore. You can fire your blaster at enemies or attempt to strike them with your mech's sword, but as both combatants are constantly shifting planes of action, actually connecting with an attack is profoundly difficult. The combat mostly amounts to flying around randomly, not accomplishing much of anything at all. There's no strategy to combat here, just button mashing and tedium. The closest thing you'll encounter to a bit of variety is the ability to take on the enemy ship to ship or mech to ship, rather than mech to mech. Ship battles play out automatically, which is an improvement over standard play. It means you may lose by no fault of your own, but on the plus side, you don't actually have to play the game. On the other hand, taking on a ship in a mech suit is practically suicide and is not advised. And that's it. Automatically, enemy ship to ship or mech to ship, rather than mech to mech. Ship battles play out automatically, which is an improvement over standard play. It means you may lose by no fault of your own, but on the plus side, you don't actually have to play the game. On the other hand, taking on a ship in a mech suit is practically suicide and is not advised. And that's it, so far as I can tell. It's a grueling, joyless game full of bad design and pointless play. Notably, this is the final Virtual Boy release, developed by Locomotive Corporation. Typically, these anime-based Bandai games are developed by Tosei, but unfortunately, Locomotive doesn't bring any new or fresh ideas to the table here. They managed to create a game just as wretched as anything Tosei ever baked up. And worse, this isn't some generic bin filler like most Gundam games end up being. Instead, it sells for something like $1,000 due to its rare, late release. Because really, what greater insult could there be to a game like this than for it to impoverish you in exchange for the dubious pleasure of playing it? There aren't a lot of games that really live up to the Virtual Boy's dire reputation, but SD Gundam Dimension War is peak Virtual Boy cliché. The nicest thing you can say for it is that it's not as awful as Virtual Lab, which is not really a high bar to clear. Finally, a Virtual Boy game where your eyes aren't the only thing exploding. It's Panic Bomber. One of the most fascinating things about Virtual Boy is that even though it was a massive commercial and critical failure, it was still a Nintendo platform. And that means it saw releases from quite a few longtime Nintendo third-party mainstays who hopped on board the platform just out of sheer inertia. They'd always supported Nintendo systems, so why not this one too? Naturally, Nintendo's oldest third-party pal put in an appearance too. Hudson may have been deeply involved in kitting out the TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine console for Nintendo rival NEC, but they never stopped publishing for Nintendo, not since releasing the very first Famicom third-party title back in 1984. And so their first Virtual Boy release, Panic Bomber, unlike
Beer.
Jack Brothers, the title and box art make it pretty clear that this is a game tied to this company's long-running and perennially beloved Bomberman series. It is not, however, a classic Bomberman game. Instead, Panic Bomber is a rare Bomberman excursion into something besides top-down competitive bomb laying, a falling block puzzle game. While it's a bit of a shame Virtual Boy never saw a traditional Bomberman title, especially after Atomic Punk and its many sequels on Game Boy turned out so well, it does make sense. As I said, the central hook of Bomberman has long been its competitive multiplayer, a feature not available for Virtual Boy due to Nintendo's failure to release the planned multiplayer Virtual Boy link cable. Although there have been a fair few single-player Bomberman titles through the years, such as Robo Warrior for NES, these almost always come with a backup competitive mode to prevent them from being a wholly solo experience. So it makes sense that Hudson would look to other genres for Bomberman's outing on a device incapable of multiplayer support. This would them from being a wholly solo experience. So it makes sense that Hudson would look to other genres for Bomberman's outing on a device incapable of multiplayer support. This would have made more sense, though, if they had actually gone with a genre that works best played solo. Panic Bomber is cut from the cloth of head-to-head competitive puzzlers. It's basically a clone of Compile's Puyo Puyo franchise. So it still kind of misses the point. Panic Bomber is a multiplayer experience that on Virtual Boy only allows one person to play. I stress on Virtual Boy because on other systems, Panic Bomber did support head-to-head play. The game debuted in Japan as a title for, yes, PC Engine, about 9 months before it shipped as a Japanese Virtual Boy launch title. Hudson ported the game to a whole slew of platforms, including Super Famicom, Neo Geo, FM Towns Marty, and the Sharp X68000. So Virtual Boy was simply added to the list of target hardware for conversions, et voila. In other words, Hudson couldn't be arsed to get together a proper bespoke Bomberman game in time for Virtual Boy's launch, just threw together a conversion of the latest one-size-fits-all spin-off they had in the works. This was absolutely the correct decision because Virtual Boy fizzled immediately at retail. BB Panic Bomber is easily one of the most poorly selling entries in the franchise of all time. Besides, Atlas gave us a taste of Bomberman-esque action with the quite excellent Jack Brothers. Virtual Boy has an unusual amount of repetition in its slim library with 2 bowling games and 2 separate versions of Tetris, so it's good to have this change of pace. Hudson did at least spruce up the game to take away has an unusual amount of repetition in its slim library with 2 bowling games and 2 separate versions of Tetris, so it's good to have this change of pace. Hudson did at least spruce up the game to take advantage of Virtual Boy's strengths. Despite the monochrome color scheme, Panic Bomber for Virtual Boy might be the most visually spectacular version of the game. Not only does it sport widescreen visuals, but the backgrounds floating behind the main action wells do a great job of setting the scene for the simplistic story mode with detailed bitmap art. It's really quite an attractive little puzzler. It's not exactly an inventive puzzler, however, although Hudson certainly made an effort to integrate the Bomberman concept into its mechanics. Again, this is very much a game in the Puyo Puyo mold, where two characters face off against one another and try to chain together falling objects in order to attack their opponent by sending cleared objects to the other side of the screen. Unlike in Puyo Puyo, falling blocks consist of 3 objects rather than 2, and the matching mechanic works more like columns. You clear blocks by lining up 3 like objects on either the horizontal, vertical, or diagonal axis, with bonuses for clearing multiples at once. As you clear away objects, you send those pieces over to your opponent's side as garbage, which pushes their pile up toward the kill line at the top of the screen. Junk blocks can only be cleared away by making matches in adjacent spaces, which means it is possible to send garbage back over in the other direction, but very difficult. What sets Panic Bomber apart from a billion other Puyo wannabes is the presence of an intermediate step in making matches, which is where the Bomberman element comes into play. Simply clearing blocks doesn't spam your opponent with junk pieces. Instead, perhaps unintuitively, when you take pieces out of play, new objects appear at the bottom of your side of the screen. For each 3-piece match you make, a small bomb pops up in your well. The bombs sit inertly and slowly push your pile upward. It's the same as junk objects do. But bombs are not junk. Every once in a while, a bomb with a lit fuse will drop into your well. When the active bomb lands, it explodes in classic Bomberman style in a cross-shaped blaze. And just as in the standard Bomberman titles, if this detonation happens to encompass another bomb, it will create a chain reaction as the other bomb explodes in a cross pattern of its own, and so on and so forth. The more inert bombs you have on screen, the greater your potential for literal screen-clearing explosions that wipe out junk and bomb pieces and send them crashing to your rival's side. This works out to be a fairly interesting and potentially complex take on Puyo Puyo's chaining mechanic. While you can still set up chain reactions here that cause multiple lines of blocks to clear away once you make a critical match, you'll have your best success by angling for carefully placed bombs that link together and nuke a massive portion of your pile in one go. Inert bombs don't simply appear at the bottom through matchmaking, they also drop into the pile as standard falling blocks as well. Learning to place these is a critical skill, as the falling bombs allow you to detonate blocks throughout your well instead of only the ones lining up at the bottom. And just as in real Bomberman games, your bombs will become more powerful as you play through the course of a match. As your flame level increases, your detonations grow in size, making it easier to create chain combos. This causes each and every match to have a rising tempo, with the action becoming increasingly frantic the longer a match goes on. On top of that, each opponent receives a large Decker bomb that clears a massive chunk of their screen after a set amount of time, forcing you to scramble to avoid being inundated by their attack. Panic Bomber offers 4 difficulty levels from the very aptly named Very Easy to the absolutely infuriating Hard. There's a difficulty modifier in the form of Skull Mode, which, not unlike the similarly named bonus feature mode in the Halo games, causes weird and unpredictable effects to transpire throughout the course of the match. Skull effects can be either beneficial or detrimental, ranging from accelerated block speeds to total screen clearing explosions. Just in case you didn't think the AI cheated enough on hard mode as it is. No question about it though, Panic Bomber really suffers from being on map feature mode in the Halo games, causes weird being inundated by their attack. Panic Bomber offers 4 difficulty levels from the very aptly named Very Easy to the absolutely infuriating Hard. There's a difficulty modifier in the form of Skull Mode, which, not unlike the similarly named bonus feature mode in the Halo games, causes weird and unpredictable effects to transpire throughout the course of the match. Skull effects can be either beneficial or detrimental, ranging from accelerated block speeds to total screen clearing explosions. Just in case you didn't think the AI cheated enough on hard mode as it is. No question about it though, Panic Bomber really suffers from being on Virtual Boy. The lack of a head-to-head 2-player option greatly diminishes its long-term play value. There are less than a dozen computer opponents here, and the replay appeal comes down to do the same thing but way harder. And as nice as the 3D graphical effects look, the monochrome graphics aren't entirely suited to a game that requires quick reactions based on being able to take in and process an entire field of play all at once. As we've seen with Game Boy matching puzzlers like Dr. Mario and Palamedes, monochrome doesn't really cut it for games about clearing colored blocks. Thankfully, Hudson had the kind-heartedness to include nearly half a dozen different tile sets. These include Bomberman side characters, icons like flames and balloons, and a group of Bombermen themselves. The most useful set, however, is the geometric object set, which consists of bold, high-contrast blocks with clear and distinct shapes. While they may not be as cute as a line of hamster blocks snoozing as you make matches around them, what these lack in personality they make up for with playability. The most notable thing about Panic Bomber, however, just might be that it's the one worthwhile Virtual Boy release that hasn't been trapped on a dead or disregarded platform. The Virtual Boy version may be tied to this hardware forever, but it's pretty easy to get a hold of other releases of the game. Hudson also released the game for the US on Neo Geo back in the day, and the Super Famicom cart is an inexpensive pickup without much of a language barrier to worry about. Konami also brought the PC Engine version to the US by way of Wii U Virtual Console, which is, at the time of this writing, the most logistically straightforward way for Americans to grab the game. Though there is some irony in the fact that the American releases of Panic Bomber made the jump from Nintendo's least successful platform ever to its second least successful. Oh well, better grab it now before Nintendo erases Wii U from their own history the way they have Virtual Boy. Here comes another one of those block dropping beats. It's V Tetris on Virtual Boy Works episode 14. We've completed our journey through the entire US Virtual Boy lineup, which means it's now time to circle back to the beginning and look at the Japan-only releases. We've completed our journey through the entire US Virtual Boy lineup, which means it's now time to circle back to the beginning and look at the Japan-only releases. There aren't a ton of these, but they're all pretty interesting, and a few of them comprise some of the most expensive video game collector's items in the entire Nintendo pantheon. This first game, however, is not one of those. Released a few weeks after the console's Japanese debut in August 1995, V Tetris is not the same game as the 3D Tetris we received as the world's very final official Virtual Boy title. Where 3D Tetris was a blockout clone developed by TNE Soft, V Tetris is actually Tetris, developed by Locomotive Corporation under the guidance of no less than Bulletproof Software. You remember Bulletproof, of course. The company was run by Hank Rogers, who played a critical role in the Western releases of Tetris. Their Game Boy rendition of the game, co-developed by Nintendo, did a lot of heavy lifting to sell the system. V Tetris could have been a case of history repeating itself again, of Tetris. Their Game Boy rendition of the game, co-developed by Nintendo, did a lot of heavy lifting to sell the system. V Tetris could have been a case of history repeating itself again. Like the original Tetris, this Bulletproof project shipped just a few weeks after the console in Japan, but the parallels stop there. For some reason, this rendition of the classic brick-clearing puzzler never reached America, let alone as a console pack-in. Maybe that's why Virtual Boy languished and vanished within a year, unlike its predecessor.
Alright, what was the Virtual Boy pack-in? Did it not come with the game? That's ridiculous, dude.
Their Game Boy. Yeah, that's gotta be it. V Tetris doesn't really do a lot to take advantage of the Virtual Boy hardware, but boy does it have an authentic legacy behind it. And it's a good, if slightly odd and maybe a little bit unnecessary take on the game. I couldn't begin to guess why it never reached the US, but Virtual Boys are region-free and this game requires approximately 0 Japanese literacy, so there's nothing stopping you from owning a copy of it as well. Both 3D Tetris and V Tetris looked at the idea of bringing Tetris to Virtual Boy, decided that meant incorporating some sort of 3D element, and promptly went about it in wildly different ways. Again, 3D Tetris abandoned baseline Tetris mechanics in favor of a blockout clone, while V Tetris is very much classic Tetris, but with a slight added dimensional element. In this case, Tetris doesn't so much enter the third dimension, so much as flirt with the idea of depth by way of Castellian, but we'll get to that. V Tetris offers 3 modes of gameplay, all of which stick fairly close to the tried and true mechanics of Tetris. Blocks fall into a well, each one consisting of 4 small tetramino blocks arranged in one of 7 shapes. And when you fill a horizontal line of the well with bricks, that line vanishes and all the blocks above drop down a line. The ultimate move is the Tetris, in which you use the eye-shaped tetramino to complete 4 lines at once. It's exactly like Tetris for Game Boy, except it's monochrome red rather than monochrome gray. Mode A of V-Tetris lets you play the endless Tetris game, where blocks simply fall infinitely until you can no longer keep up. Every 10 lines you clear, the action speeds up slightly. Mode B is the standard mode, where the screen clears out and starts afresh once you complete a level. Otherwise, it's the same thing as Mode A. Nothing about either of these modes does a single meaningful thing to take advantage of the Virtual Boy hardware. There's a little bit of parallax in the frame graphics, but these are static images that don't really do anything more than act as window dressing. The V-Tetris experience only comes into focus when you boot up Mode C, which is called New Type Loop. At first glance, this appears to be basically a punitive take on standard Tetris. As usual, tetraminos fall into a well and you need to clear them away. Unlike in other Tetris adaptations though, there's a back layer to the well. At first this doesn't seem to do much, but eventually you'll notice that when you only
Did we win? We did.
clear a single line, bricks will fall into the back layer. Eventually the back layer's tetraminos will reach the kill line and it's game over. In other words, the only way to survive in New Type Loop mode is to clear 2 or more lines at once. Or so it seems. But in truth, there's a less obvious mechanic at work here, which gives the mode its name, the loop element. The front and back layers aren't actually fixed elements, you see. Rather, you can rotate the well to push the forward-facing blocks into the background, and vice versa, one column at a time. This adds a whole new dimension to Tetris, if you'll pardon the expression, doubling the size of the active play space and challenging you to keep the background's layout in mind as you drop blocks into play. The layer swapping design might bring to mind the rotating tower effect of a game like Castellion, or Kirby's Adventure, or Battletoads. As always, Virtual Boy wasn't powerful enough to produce the layer swapping design might bring to mind the rotating tower effect of a game like Castellion, or Kirby's Adventure, or Battletoads. As always, Virtual Boy wasn't powerful enough to produce true 3D polygonal graphics, so this faked up raster effect has to substitute for actual 3D. But it works. V-Tetris' New Type Loop is a fun wrinkle on Tetris that adds to the core game design without radically altering or compromising it, a rare feat in the novelty-chasing world of Tetris sequels. Really, the only thing that doesn't make sense about V-Tetris is the fact that it never came to the US. What's up with that? Maybe it has something to do with the awful clown-themed graphical frames, which must have been a huge turnoff to someone at Nintendo's approval department. Or maybe they just figured Americans were sick of Tetris. But whatever the case, it's really a shame that V-Tetris never made it over here. It's one of the most unique yet faithful interpretations of Tetris I've ever seen, and it's still extremely playable. But once again, V-Tetris requires 0 Japanese literacy and is one of the few Japanese exclusives for Virtual Boy that hasn't rocketed up in price in the aftermarket. And there's no region locking for Virtual Boy. In other words, this is one worth tracking down. Sure, you can play lots of other Tetris variants with no eye strain and no clowns, but to my knowledge there's no other version of Tetris that offers V-Tetris' inventive rotational effect. Variants with no eye strain and no clowns, but to my knowledge there's no other version of Tetris that offers V-Tetris' inventive rotational effect.
Music's pretty good, so I'm gonna have to play the game actually.
this game is literally poop. It's Virtual Lab on a very tragic episode of Virtual Boy Works. As our journey through Virtual Boy's library draws to a conclusion, I can't help but reflect on the fact that, as you've discovered with me, the console's hateful reputation is largely undeserved. Yes, the hardware stumbled over some conceptual failures at a fundamental level, but the games that shipped on Virtual Boy weren't anywhere near as hopeless as nearly 25 years of punditry would suggest. Of course, well-regarded titles like Wario Land and Jack Brothers turned out to be obvious wins, but think about how many Virtual Boy creations exceeded their dire internet reputations. For example, Innsmouth no Yakata was, contrary to rumor, a tense and thrilling corridor shooter. Panic Bomber was a fun puzzler. Golf was good. Waterworld was flawed but interesting. Even Nestor's Funky Bowling offered a pretty decent rendition of the sport. With this in mind, we arrive at the next Virtual Boy release to suffer from a dire reputation, J-Wing's Virtual Lab, widely regarded as the absolute worst officially licensed title for the console. Based on previous experience though, it stands to reason that this means Virtual Lab is probably actually going to be pretty good, right? Well, no. Every once in a while, you come across a game that is universally reviled, and that universal point of view is actually bang on. Virtual Lab is one of those. On its surface, it doesn't seem like it should be terrible. It's a falling block puzzler, and we've seen several of those already on the platform. Virtual Boy's puzzle games have ranged from the merely okayish 3D Tetris to the legitimately enjoyable V-Tetris. Virtual Lab is cut from the same cloth as Tetris and also incorporates an element of Lucasfilm Games' Pipe Dream. Surely that's a winning combination. But no, Virtual Lab manages to be a deeply unpleasant game on every possible level.
Yeah, why did George Lucas found Lucas Games?
At this very moment, LEGO Fortnite Odyssey is under attack. I'm looking for heroes who are sweet and heroes with a beat, heroes with muscle, heroes who hustle. I need pairing, daring, fighting, uniting. Let's do this. LEGO Fortnite Odyssey. Download and play for free.
Carmex Lip Care sure has it all. Daily moisturizing? You betcha. Weather protection? Definitely. Big flavors in mini tubes? Aren't they fun? What about new 12-hour advanced repair? We said we had it all, right? Carmex does the job.
And I'm gonna turn this on. Whoops. There we go. Okay. Let me see. Ozaru. I don't like Kaioken here as a form. Should I rank the baby ones? Like what the... IDK. All right, Ozaru, solid B. Kaioken, I don't want to rank that. I'm not ranking you. Super Saiyan 1.
Yes, sir.
Super Saiyan grade 2 B. Grade 3 is some balls, bro. That shit is lame as fuck. Super Saiyan Power, I'm not ranking. Super Kaioken, I'm not ranking. Super Saiyan 2.
Hey, come on now.
I'm gonna think about this one. Yeah, that's true.
For chakra. Redundant and irrelevant.
She's also got
Uzumaki.
Uzumaki.
All this really did for him, practically speaking, is make it possible for him to use the multi-shadow clone jutsu, which Iruka points out he worked himself to death to learn anyway.
Okay, so we're real close to what I would reckon is like the reason why Naruto has such an advantage over everybody else, right? Absolutely, we can all agree that like having this insane amount of chakra allows him to use multi-shadow clone jutsu. That's a massive advantage. Not even just because on the battlefield he can make 100 or so clones, because when he's training he can make 100 or so clones. And we see this happen time and time again. Really, any time that Naruto needs to train, he relies on the multi-shadow clone jutsu, something that nobody
Anytime? Anytime? You mean the one time? Naruto relies on his clones to train one time. Once. When he's learning Rasen Shuriken.
do, and therefore he's able to learn the Rasen Shuriken in an appropriate amount of time that allows for him to use it against Kakuzu and eventually win that fight. Without the ability to use the multi-shadow clone jutsu there, Naruto doesn't get to that battlefield with a jutsu that takes Kakuzu out. So just having that bigger than average chakra pool allows Naruto to have access to a jutsu that allows for him to train hundreds of times faster than anybody else.
Now, some of you are probably thinking that what I just said is ridiculous. Surely being the son of the fourth Hokage and a particularly blessed member of the Uzumaki clan means Naruto should be predisposed to being a good ninja, right? No, that's not how that works. If you're good at something, your kid isn't going to be automatically good at it.
So he's going to make
Sometimes
fun of here.
some famous singers are the children of other famous singers, so on and so forth, but it's not.
Okay, but if we're putting up a picture of Bronny James here, like I get Bronny James isn't as good as LeBron James, and I get that the only reason that he's on the Lakers currently is because he's LeBron James' son. But like, we're not going to sit here and act like LeBron James Jr. is bad at basketball, right? But we're not going to sit here and act like anybody in this chat would stand up.
No, I put him in the like, I just put that picture up there because the tweet is funny. I'm not making a point about Bronny.
That shit, that tweet is fucking hilarious.
Hey, yo, bro, who that guy is?
If they actually survived and had taught Naruto the same way other ninja have been shown instructing their children, then we could talk about privilege as far as this is
100% if Minato and Kushina survived, would Naruto have been in a more privileged situation? No doubt in my mind. Obviously, if you have a particularly blessed member of the Uzumaki, as Swag calls them, and Kushina, and like calling Kushina particularly blessed, once again, is kind of an undersell. Like, she is
What? How's that? Whatever.
This is an undersell.
Saying Kushina is particularly blessed is accurate.
He said, but he's saying it's an undersell. Like she's
It's
like,
not an undersell. Particularly, like Hashirama is a particularly blessed member of the Senju clan. That's not an undersell.
I guess he's saying that doesn't do enough. Like, yeah, like.
Uzumaki,
Yeah.
the only person who could possibly follow in Mito's shoes, like genuinely a generational talent in terms of like genetic lineage that has been established to take on this gigantic role, which is being the Jinchuriki of the entirety of Kurama, not half. She's one of the most powerful Uzumaki in the history of the Uzumaki clan, which is one of the most powerful clans in the history of Naruto and Minato. Like, if both of them had survived, yes, Naruto would have been way more privileged. He would have been closer to Boruto as a character than he is to Naruto.
Closest Naruto comes to benefiting from who his parents are is when he meets each of them respectively inside his mind as part of the sealing jutsu Minato used to make Naruto the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Both of them actually offer Naruto some pretty meaningful, tangible help when they meet him. Minato stops the seal from breaking, which saves Naruto's life, and Kushina uses her chains to partially suppress the Nine Tails and help Naruto defeat it. But think about this for just a second. What part of this requires Naruto to be related to either of them?
I don't think Swag has read the Minato one-shot. So what he's saying right there is essentially the only time that
Bro, why does he keep saying this?
Think about this for just a second. What part of this requires Naruto to be related?
Keep saying this.
Minato one-shot. So what he's saying right there is essentially the only time that
Bro, why does he keep saying this?
What's play, bro? I want to hear this so
Whatever
bad.
benefits from the fact that he's related to Minato and Kushina is in these moments where in the like his inner sanctum, in the 8 trigram seal kind of like extra dimensional space, where Minato and Kushina essentially stop him from having this having the nine tail show up, right? Essentially, what happens there is Minato fixes the 8 trigram seal, Kushina uses the adamantine chains to suppress Kurama's chakra, and that's all really important. Now, Swag goes on to say, but what does any of this have to do with him being related to them? And unfortunately, it kind of has a lot to do with it. Like, the way that the 8 trigram seals work is that the only reason that Minato and Kushina are in the 8 trigram seal at all is because they love Naruto. Like, this is established in the Minato one-shot. It's the reason that Hashirama was inside of Mito's 8 trigram seal, and it's the reason that Kushina was inside of Minato's 8 trigram seal. And
Whoa. What the fuck is that nigga talking about? Hashirama was in who?
Was it Mito's seal?
Hashirama was in whose seal? Like, what? Because they loved it. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess because they, yeah. But what the fuck does the Minato one shot has absolutely nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
bro. What the fuck? Keep playing it.
Love in there or balance out the hatred that Kurama feels, the Jinchuriki in question. Though while hypothetically, yes, Minato and Kushina could love Naruto without them being his child, that's not really a situation that he would be in. And even if that was a situation that he was in, if Naruto wasn't related to Minato and Kushina, he wouldn't be in the situation that he was on the night of his birth. Like, unfortunately, the argument kind of unravels itself if you try to be like, oh, well, he doesn't have to be related. Like, why would
What?
baby Naruto be with Minato and Kushina? Naruto, if he wasn't related to Minato and Kushina, wouldn't have been powerful enough as a baby to even hold on to half of Kurama. Minato establishes this when he says that, oh, we can't seal all of Kurama into Naruto because if we did, it would probably kill him, like the chakra leaking out would probably kill him. And so it's established that Naruto is at a certain threshold of strength to be able to hold on to half of Kurama. So, I don't know if I agree with that one.
The whole point of dying and getting half the cost to Naruto was to keep the Nine Tails under the Leaf's control. So
See, once again, this like completely ignores the fact that the reason that Minato and Kushina are in the 8 trigram seal is love, and that is very much something that is canonically established in the Minato one-shot.
Minato had a vested interest in helping that person the same way he helped Naruto.
Unfortunately, I just don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. Like,
But doesn't Minato love the village? So like he could have just put himself in anybody.
What is this love bullshit he's talking about? You don't have to read the one shot to know that they love their fucking kid.
Yeah. So it's this panel that he's talking about. I don't. So he's saying that you have to love. You have to love the person to put your to seal your. I don't think that's true.
The reason that Minato and Kushina are in the 8 trigram seal is love, and that is very much something that is canonically established in the Minato one-shot.
Minato
I
had a
don't. No, I don't think so.
vested interest in helping that person the same way he helped Naruto.
Unfortunately,
Someone said he should, like, y'all need to chill out. Like, MC Hammer should just quit YouTube. Bro, chill on.
I don't agree with that at all. Like, if it was a random kid, there is obviously a chance that Minato and Kushina, being the good people that they are, would be able to inject love and caring into the 8 trigram seal. But we see that Minato doesn't.
Someone donated 10 to say Tobirama maxes at 3 clones. No, that's not true. He does not max at 3.
Part of Kushina's 8 trigram seal until he actively fights against Kurama. Like, Minato has to get, like, punched through the gut by a version 2 Jinchuriki cloak version of Kushina to just even begin his journey.
Here, let me read some super chats real quick. Nathan Perry 2 is Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks as strong as Super Saiyan 3 Goku at the end of Z. If you mean at the end of Buu arc, this is a real question. I still think it's no, but end of Z, clearly not. Because, you know, God key and shit. Big U said Super Saiyan Rage sucks balls and you know it 6 for $2. Leaf Blady donated 2 asking, what time do you think you'll start tomorrow? I'm not sure. 6 and I will work that out. Jason Smith donated 2, stop being a hater and make Boruto content. Hey, bro, let me do my thing. Nick donated 2, ever watch JoJo? Would you ever make vids on it? I've watched Phantom Blood and half of Battle Tendency. I don't think I'll ever make videos on it though. $10 from Jameer Cooper. My take is that Vegeta just didn't train to master it like Goku because they acknowledged the problems of using it without a dead body. Goku probably was like, I can do this while Vegeta stuck to 2. Yeah, maybe, I guess. I would have used it if I was him. Beast Gohan is dumber than Rage. I really don't want to get into how I feel about Beast. I think Beast is a silly form. I think it's kind of annoying that Gohan's cosplaying as himself from the Cell arc in Superhero. That's a discussion for another time, though. I don't think it's dumber than Rage, though. Rage is my least favorite form in the series. Moses donated $2 again. That pause is perfect for BBC Hammer. And Colby Cheese, $5. Nick is going to start 2025 as BBC Hammer. This is historic. Leon, again, with $5. Does having a Biju inside of you actually cause physical pain, or is it a tolerance thing? I don't... It's like painful when Minato seals the Nine Tails inside of himself, but Naruto doesn't seem to know that Kurama's in him for a while, so I don't think so. Kilo super chatted $10. He thinks it needs love because of that panel, but Mito is talking about falling in love to make life better despite being a Jinchuriki. Yeah, that's what I think too. Appreciate the donos, everybody.
to being in Kushina's 8 trigram seal to battle against Kurama. So to assume that they would have the level of affection required to insert part of their chakra into the 8 trigram seal with it just being a random kid, it just doesn't resonate with me, unfortunately.
Now, before anyone tries to fight me on the genetics thing I was talking about a second ago, it's stated with no ambiguity that Naruto's parents didn't pass any special gifts on.
Okay, there's a couple of ways you can interpret what's being said here. So even though his paw is a stage of 6 paths, so basically what Naruto is talking about with Hagoromo here is Hagoromo's telling Naruto about how, like, Indra and Asura's story, and about how Asura was born in Dunce, even though, like, and Naruto's like, wow, how was he born in Dunce? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, his dad was a stage of 6 paths. She was one of the most talented ninjas of all time. And so Hagoromo's like, perhaps things be said, like, no matter how exceptional both parents are, there's no guarantee one will inherit outright either of their abilities sound familiar. So basically, what Hagoromo was saying to Naruto here is, like, regardless of how powerful your parents are, there's no guarantee that you will get their strength. And absolutely, you can 100% use these manga panels as a way to be like, look, if Hagoromo, the sage of 6 paths, says that your parentage doesn't have anything to do with your power, that, I mean, like, who are we to argue with the quite literal god of Shinobi, the guy who made ninjutsu a possibility? But at the end of the day, there is so much evidence to fly directly in the face of this claim from Hagoromo. And yes, you can make the argument.
No.
Oh, what's wrong with this nigga? Why does he think that because some exceptional people had exceptional kids, that means that all exceptional people will have exceptional kids? All Hagoromo is saying is there's no guarantee that the kid is going to be exceptional. Not that the kid can't be exceptional. Yeah. But he says with Naruto, you should know this more than anybody because he was not exceptional due to his parentage.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I don't get why this keeps getting brought up.
The reason I'm laughing is because it just reminded me of your tweet the other day. Cypher King Omer super chatted $10 swag. Who do you think wins, alive Hashirama or alive Minato? Well, they don't want me to tell you this, but Minato might be too fast for Hashirama to hit him. And Kurama did say Minato is a most powerful shinobi of the same caliber as the first Hokage Hashirama Senju in the one shot, so.
All the people that we see gain a ridiculous amount of power that came from powerful parents absolutely worked for it time and time again. It is established that powerful ninjas in the Naruto universe come from powerful ninjas. Like I said earlier, Kakashi and Sasuke, Itachi and Sasuke and Fugaku, even Shisui. Shishui's grandfather is established to have a greater ocular genjutsu prowess than even...
What? I think Shisui's strong because he's an Uchiha.
Shisui's grandfather...
I mean, Shisui's not even that... Like, he loses to Danzo.
Shisui's not that fucking strong.
Was on on Tobirama's protection detail. And like Shisui passingly talks about how he was one of the greatest Genjutsu Sharingan users of all time. Time and time again, it is established that powerful parents make powerful ninjas. And that point is only further exasperated in Boruto, as every single member of Konoha 12 that was even remotely powerful ended up having very powerful kids. Like Sasuke has again, Sarada. One of the youngest people to ever awaken in MS. And like, oh, she's like a pseudo MC of the next generation. Of course she's gonna be
one of the youngest people to ever awaken in MS. She's what? She's younger than Itachi when he awakened it. Or no, she's older than Itachi when he awakened it.
Yeah.
She's like around the same age as Obito.
Yeah.
She's older than Shisui and younger than Sasuke.
Yeah.
I mean, in MS in general, like, I guess, yeah, like only certain Uchiha do have the capacity to awaken it, but
I mean, this also isn't a moment of
dramatic event.
Yeah, this isn't a moment of genius. This is an emotional moment.
Yeah.
Powerful parents make powerful ninjas. And what Hagoromo is saying, that's not the case. We cannot ignore the
I
mountain
guess Boruto should. I'm not gonna say that shit to Daigo said
evidence that we have to prove
because
this
anybody without the context will just think I'm a freak.
Pretty much every time he interacts with Naruto, Orochimaru finds an opportunity to say something about how he's just not as good as Sasuke. He witnesses the power of the Nine Tails on 2 separate occasions and never once considers stealing Naruto's body.
Yes, absolutely. Orochimaru has less interest in Naruto than he has in Sasuke or even Itachi, but that's less because Orochimaru is interested in Naruto as a person, and more because Orochimaru is interested in the Sharingan. Like, it's time and time again established that Orochimaru finds Itachi.
Yeah, but like, I just feel like it's telling that Orochimaru doesn't even have like a backup plan for Naruto. Like, he's not even like, oh, well, if I can't get Sasuke, I'll at least get Naruto, you know? He was more interested in fucking Kimimaro than Naruto.
And Sasuke as perfect vessels because of their ridiculously powerful Sharingans. It's not that Naruto has less genetic potential than Sasuke and Itachi, it's just that Sasuke and Itachi have a no-jutsu that Orochimaru's interested in.
She first meets him. Tsunade doesn't seem to think much of Naruto either, and she's floored when she sees him perform the Rasengan for the first time. It's actually revealed later that Tsunade knows who his parents are too.
First off, man, peak Tsunade, my god. Second off, absolutely, in this moment in time, Tsunade...
Actually revealed later that Tsunade knows who his parents are too.
First off, man, peak Tsunade, my god. Second off, Okay, absolutely. In this moment in time, Tsunade is absolutely denigrating Naruto. She says he has no potential. She's surprised when he uses the Rasengan. But I feel like talking about Tsunade in this context kind of is disingenuous to her character arc, because obviously this is the introduction of Tsunade as a character, right? And this is the lowest Tsunade's ever been. Tsunade at this moment is drinking every day. She's gambling away all her money. She's pissing away the potential that she could possibly have. Like, this is as low as Tsunade gets as a character. To say that Tsunade doesn't see the potential in Naruto because Naruto is an unimpressive person, to me, I don't know. It doesn't resonate with me correctly, because like that has
What? I don't know, bro. I feel like it's pretty straightforward that she doesn't see potential in him.
less to do with who Naruto is in this moment in time, and more to do with Tsunade's character development arc. Like,
I feel like half this stream is just me pausing and going, what?
A pessimist at the time. Tsunade doesn't see any purpose in living. She's afraid of blood. She refuses to heal. She refuses to come back.
Nathan Perry super chatted $2 and said, you think Sadara, he said Sadara, a baddie? I'm gonna have to time you out.
What the fuck?
I'm gonna have to.
That pedophile on. Hold up.
Yeah.
Back to the village to become the fifth Hokage, even though the village needs her desperately. So like, her being cruel to Naruto here, to me, isn't an indicator that Naruto is unimpressive as a potential, like, incredibly powerful ninja. It's more like a view into who Tsunade and like who was at this moment and how she's feeling.
The three-way deadlock, Jiraiya and Orochimaru speak briefly about Naruto. In this conversation, Orochimaru says, to quote him directly, "My ability to recognize talent is unrivaled. In my eyes, that kid is nothing but mediocre." Jiraiya, one of the only people in the series who actually knows that Naruto is the son of the fourth Hokage, doesn't respond by saying something like, "Well, he actually does have talent, you just don't know him," or whatever. He agrees with Orochimaru and explains that this is exactly why he wants to train Naruto.
Once again, unfortunately, this is kind of like a thing that I've been talking about throughout the duration of this video, where like we're using part one conversations and all that to try and build up the idea that Naruto has always been an underdog. I don't think anybody's gonna sit here and disagree with the fact that in this moment Naruto is absolutely an underdog, because this is still early Naruto. And I'll sit here and tell you all day long that in this moment and for the entirety of part one of Naruto was an underdog. It was an underdog story. It's the events that come after this moment that unfortunately fly in the face of that, right? So I agree with what Swag is saying. Like, absolutely, like yes.
Didn't this nigga just admit? Didn't he admit earlier that Swag that he didn't learn shit over the time skip? All he got was a bigger Rasengan.
He's talking about this from experience because he's trained Nagato. So rather, he'd rather train somebody who has no natural talents, and that's what we're talking about Naruto as, somebody with no natural talents. But once again, that's kind of building up the point that I'm trying to make, is that in the beginning of the story, we're building out an underdog.
I'm gonna listen to this music.
a story that's unfortunately squashed thematically down the line.
Orochimaru assumes that this is because Jiraiya wants a student he sees himself in, one who reminds him of a younger Jiraiya, who, by the way, is applied over and over, was a dunce in his youth the same way Naruto was,
Yeah,
and
very
eventually
similar
became one of the most
characters.
powerful ninja in the world. Now you can try to rationalize it.
Yeah, like, so, you know, what I don't understand is why people don't, like, people are like, oh, Lee should have been the main character, but I feel like Jiraiya is, like, because, like, Jiraiya starts as a fucking loser. He has no Kekkei Genkai or any of that bullshit. He sucks, and then he becomes, like, a ninja god. Why does nobody
we
ever
see me as a kid.
Yeah, but why does nobody ever be like, oh, we should, the kid Jiraiya should, blah, 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 blah. I guess I see what you mean, though.
Yeah.
Along with
I guess I see what you mean, though.
Yeah.
along with whatever Orochimaru was saying to keep him from realizing that Naruto was the son of the fourth Hokage or whatever.
But unfortunately, drawing connections between Jiraiya and Naruto also kind of proves my point. Because if we're saying that Naruto and Jiraiya have been on similar character paths, Jiraiya dying in a fight against Nagato, when Naruto should have died in a fight against Nagato, kind of proves that the genetic advantages and the things that Naruto was born with are what allowed Naruto to, like, win in that fight. And while Swag absolutely conceded that, like, it was Kurama that saves Naruto's life in the battle against Nagato, Naruto's active comparisons to Jiraiya and the fact that they were both dunces and they're both the losers in their groups, unfortunately kind of substantiates the point that Naruto's advantages are what makes him more special than Jiraiya.
So let's move on to the last supposed source of Naruto's privilege.
Alright, man.
The reincarnation of Ashura Otsutsuki, one of the two sons of the Sage of Six Paths. Now, at first glance,
I feel like he completely missed the point that I was making there. Like, it's really weird to, like, sidestep this thing where, like, Jiraiya's like, yeah, he's a dunce, he's a doofus, that's why I'm training him, and just be like, oh, well, this is part one, and then be like, yeah, he beat Pain because of the Nine Tails and Shippuden, which is an asset he also has in part one.
This is like this whole interpretation of the manga is so weird and foreign to me.
Yeah,
because I think that like, just to me, right, in chat, I'm sure a lot of you agree, and a lot of you can probably empathize with this. Like, all of this seems like such a reach. All of this seems like someone being unable to look at any broader context, had one idea and chose to interpret everything as fitting the idea.
yeah.
When it comes to someone saying that, you know, Naruto was never an underdog, it's so far-fetched, so left field to me that it feels like it's not a genuine interpretation, which I know it is. I know NCM is not, like, lying, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's being
It's
brutal.
just like, it's just so weird.
kind of chosen one-esque, or at least appears that way.
I mean, it's not chosen one-esque. Like, it is literally he is the chosen one. Like, they're saying, like, hey, in every generation there is a reincarnation of two children of God. Ashura and Indra are full stop the children of God. Like, Hagoromo is considered the god of Shinobi. He is an extra-dimensional entity that's able to infinitely.
But okay, but that doesn't make them chosen ones, because what did Ashura and Hashirama accomplish? Like, Hashirama created a framework that fucking murdered a bunch of children and led to wars. Like, he's a complete, total, abject failure. Six and I talk about this all the time. Hashirama is just Naruto if he failed.
Yeah.
And he has the Ashura shit too. And I mean, I said this at the beginning of the stream, so many more socio-political advantages. You know, he's the patriarch of his clan. He partnered with the patriarch of the other most powerful clan in the world to create the Hidden Leaf Village, which was the framework that the other four great nations used for their ninja villages. You know, he held the first Kage Summit. He tamed all of the tailed beasts. He married into another powerful clan that Hammer keeps saying is like super mega fucking elite gobstopper fucking big dick powerful, right? When the clan was in its prime and had a bunch of members too is when Hashirama married into it. You know, he had a genius brother who is a solid tactical advisor, like all this shit, and he still failed because he didn't have the same heart and soul as Naruto. Like, all of these advantages didn't matter because he wasn't able to stay composed under pressure. Like we were saying at the beginning of the stream, Hashirama was so close, but he cracked where Naruto didn't. If Naruto had given up on Sasuke, Naruto would be in the exact same position Hashirama was. But Naruto didn't, right? So, I don't know.
I will say, one thing that makes Naruto feel at least a little bit special is that he's an Uzumaki who was chosen to be Ashura's reincarnate. Because, as you know, whenever Indra and Ashura, made their separate clans, Ashura made Senju, Indra made Uchiha, and Indra seemingly just gets passed down through that. And I guess you could imply the same thing with Ashura, but then Naruto gets it, and Naruto's an Uzumaki.
He is an offshoot of the Senju clan, though.
Yeah, the Uzumaki are they're cousin clans, right?
I think Ashura is also the progenitor of the Uzumaki clan, but I don't remember. That might be in the filler. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely not in the manga.
To Super Saiyan 1 and
Popularity poll after this. Look at all these ones, man. Look at these ones, Karthu. Look at this. This is history, bro. Look at it. Look at all these fucking ones. All right, now chat. Bam 2's in chat. If Swag should debate NC Hammer on if Naruto was really an underdog.
No, it was Hashirama's response.
And
Right, so people are saying, one of the biggest points people say about Naruto not being the chosen one is that Naruto and Sasuke, the only thing they got from Asura and Indra, like being a reincarnation, is that they have to fight against each other. But right here, literally, right here, Hashirama was saying, even after their flesh perished, the chakra, the two hones continue to reincarnate across time without vanishing.
That doesn't necessarily mean that Naruto is using, like, Ashura's, like, unfiltered chakra. Like, you know what I'm saying, Sick? Like their chakra, like, reforming and reincarnating into other people doesn't mean that, like, oh, they just get it, like, one-to-one. Otherwise, Naruto would be born with the avatar. It's just, like, it's like a very, like, spiritual thing where, like, Ashura's essence of being, like, keeps forming into, like, new people. But that doesn't mean that Naruto has Ashura's chakra or that Sasuke has Indra's.
And this is why,
I agree. I think that's the way it should be interpreted.
Yeah. Kind of like they're haunting the people they reincarnate with, because this is a physical manifestation of their chakra, which means that Ashura and Indra's chakra does technically, in a sense, bind to their own reincarnation, which is why Naruto and Sasuke so closely, both in appearance and abilities, resemble Ashura and Indra. And that's
They don't have the same abilities, though. Like, what the fuck do Naruto and Hashirama have in common in terms of, like, abilities? Sage mode? That's it.
That's why the same thing happens with Hashirama and the same thing happens with Madara. Like,
They don't even get it
Naruto
from the
is able
same
to
place.
make their own choices. At the end of the day, the Ashura and Indra reincarnations puts them in a direction of being fantastically, overly powerful ninjas that will battle against each other at the highest level possible. And while usually their cooperation is incredibly rare, this is established by Black Zetsu. At the end of the day, Ashura and Indra collaborating and combining their chakra is a fundamental part of Black Zetsu's plan. Without that, there would never be the Rinnegan, who would never be able to get the Ghetto statue off the moon. This is why.
No. Saying that Ashura and Indra collaborating as part of Black Zetsu's plan is very, very misleading. He kept pitting them against each other. I don't even think that's misleading. I think that's just wrong. He wanted somebody to get the Rinnegan, but he was constantly pitting them against each other. He, like, poisoned Indra's brain against Ashura. And, you know, like, he changed the Uchiha Stone tablet and shit. He was, like, whispering in Madara's ear. Like, no, he did not want them to work together.
Zetsu manipulated Madara into taking part of Ashurama's flesh, closing it into his wound, and eventually tapping into the Ghetto statue, the thing that I think at that time... Wait, hold on, how did he get the Ghetto statue? He waits to the Ghetto statue at the end of his life, taps into it, officially connects his life, and gets ready to works. With Ashura and Indra's chakra combining, the Ghetto statue never comes back from him. Therefore, the Eye Moon plan never starts. So you can't say that Black Zetsu's plan has nothing to do with Ashura and Indra reincarnating. In fact, Ashura and Indra reincarnating and eventually cooperating is paramount in his plan.
Kashi also alludes to something like this when he picks Naruto up from the final valley after the fight at the end of part 1. And the weight of this conflict falls on Naruto's shoulders. Naruto has to succeed where every person before him has failed in a battle against what he's told is fate itself. Ashura failed to reach a peaceful resolution with Indra, Hashirama failed to do the same with Madara, and the same was true of every pair of reincarnates in the but Naruto succeeded here.
100%, I 100% agree with what Swag is saying here. There is absolutely a incredibly difficult goal that is thrust upon Naruto, that he has to bring the Indra reincarnation that he was reincarnated with into the fold. He has to forgive them. He has to get them to break the cycle of hatred. And that is an insanely difficult goal. And it's something that only Naruto ever achieves. And that's kind of the difference of what I'm talking about here. Like, I never said that ideologically Naruto isn't a underdog. Like, the things that Naruto has to accomplish in the face of overwhelming odds are very
Well, then we agree. What?
Yeah. So I want to know then, right? What's his response to Naruto doing that? Because according to Destiny, he's not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
1,000-year history of reincarnations to bring the Indra reincarnation back into the fold. That is a monstrously difficult task.
The first is that fate doesn't actually exist in the world of Naruto, and that being Ashura reincarnated had no bearing on Naruto's life or achievements, or that fate does exist, but Naruto had to succeed in spite of it. In either case, this whole Neji was right business is nonsense. I mean,
Fate absolutely does exist, right? Fate absolutely, in all contexts, fate exists in the Naruto universe. Destiny and fate exist. There is, throughout the entirety of the conversation around Naruto and Sasuke being reincarnation, the concept of fate is introduced because they are fated to battle against each other. I mean, that's something that they talk about.
What? But they don't, right? Like, well, they battle, but then they like stop, right? Like they break the like the karmic cycle of fate. And shit.
Now, as a matter of having to succeed in spite of it, that I agree with a little bit. But at the end of the day, we can
Somebody in chat said agrees aggressively.
say that, like, oh, Naruto was fated to battle against the Indra reincarnation of his time, which ends up being Sasuke, and they're fated to never, ever succeed in mending the giant hole between them. However, that also applies to the face of Naruto being the child of prophecy, who's supposed to bring peace on Earth, right? So Naruto kind of has two different fates. He has the fate of being in a ceaseless cycle of violence against Sasuke, but he also has the fate of being the child of prophecy, who brings peace to the entirety of the ninja world. So,
Okay, yeah.
these two fates overpowers each other at the end of the day, the child of prophecy fate.
this is a key aspect of Naruto's character throughout the series, and it's something I often see people ignore. Naruto expects a lot
Wait,
of
what the fuck? Six, did you hear this shit?
No, I had it in my head. What's it?
Ceaseless cycle of violence against Sasuke, but he also has the fate of being the child of prophecy, who brings peace to the entirety of the ninja world. So, like, which of these two fates overpowers each other at the end of the day, the child of prophecy fate?
This is a key aspect.
Naruto can bring peace to the end of the world, or to the world, by killing Sasuke.
Yeah.
You can 100% do that.
He's saying like fate is real, but these two fates like clash and like don't make sense together. So like whichever one is overpowers the other one is. I'm so confused.
Yeah, fuck no. Fuck no.
Aspect of Naruto's character throughout the series, and it's something I often see people ignore. Naruto expects a lot of himself, more than most people do, and more than most people in his position often.
Okay, Kiba thinks he's gonna be Hokage, but the difference between him and Naruto is Kiba feels entitled to it, where Naruto doesn't. Naruto knows that he has to like bust his ass working towards that shit, you know? Like
Kiba really feel entitled to that? I don't remember that.
he's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna become Hokage. Check this out, and he does one shadow clone. He thinks he's the shit.
Hokage. I wouldn't say that Naruto expects more of himself. I would say he works towards his goals harder than the other people who have the identical goals as him.
This is highlighted time and time again as the single most prominent catalyst for his growth. The Shadow Clone Jutsu, the Rasengan, the Rasen Shuriken, Sage Mode, and Beast Bomb are all things that he can't learn.
But unfortunately, every single one of these things is contingent on this first thing right here. So obviously Naruto does train very hard to learn.
No. Every
See,
single
being a
one.
dad, it wasn't on my bingo card. Bingo, what are you talking about?
I mean, he's not wrong. It's not on his bingo card.
But he's like really like what's he talking about?
He just said you being a dad isn't on his bingo card. And it's not.
Alright.
Bro, so he says all of these jutsu are contingent on the first one? No.
But unfortunately, every single one of these things is contingent on this first thing right here. So obviously Naruto does train very hard to learn the multi-shadow clone jutsu. We don't know how long he trains in it. We know that he learned, like, he steals the Forbidden Scroll. Mizuki follows him out. He wants to get the Forbidden Scroll. Haruka follows him out. You know, obviously takes a big old shuriken to the back. But like Naruto probably isn't trained in the multi-shadow clone jutsu for like longer than a day. We see that like he's like, oh, worked ragged when Haruka and Mizuki like stumble upon him here. But like he definitely doesn't work on it for like weeks at a time. Right? The Forbidden Scrolls he identified to be stolen almost immediately. And
No, he is always improving at the multi-shadow clone jutsu. Like, we steadily see him start to do shit with it that he couldn't do before.
And Naruto only has the time that he's with the Forbidden Scroll to learn the multi-shadow clone jutsu. And he spends the entirety of the time that he has with this Forbidden Scroll that has things like Tensei and a bunch of the other Forbidden jutsu Konoha inside of it, only trying to learn that multi-shadow clone jutsu. He learns it pretty immediately. Unfortunately, every other one of these things he's only able to accomplish because of what he learns here, right? And he's able to pull this off because of the Uzumaki chakra reserves that he has. Like, he's able to learn.
No, him making one clone for Rasengan has nothing to do with his Uzumaki chakra reserves. Kakashi can make clones. Zabuza can make clones, etc., etc.
Rasengan easier because he's able to use multiple people, he's able to use multiple shadow clones to apply chakra, swirl it, add shape transformation. He's able to do this because he uses shadow clones to apply shape transformation, wind release, all that to his Rasen Shuriken. He learns Sage Mode because he can have multiple clones trying pull in nature energy, and if they pull in too much nature energy,
You can have up to 2 clones. No more than that. Has nothing to do with his Uzumaki chakra.
they turn into stone, but it doesn't affect Naruto, right? Same thing with like KCM1, he's able to like accomplish because he uses multiple shadow clones to beat Kurama in a fight. So unfortunately, it is his genetic predisposition that gives him access.
Okay, bro. I thought that earlier in this video, he agreed that Naruto earned KCM1. And now he's like, well, I mean, he kind of cheated by using multi-shadow clone jutsu. Like,
The thing that makes all of these other accomplishments significantly easier.
It's an extremely good chance he failed many times before pulling it off, because when Iruka found him, Naruto hadn't even started practicing the second jutsu listed on the scroll. He literally couldn't perform the Rasengan properly when he first learned it, because he wasn't talented enough.
Okay, but saying that Naruto couldn't perform the Rasengan correctly when he first tried it because he wasn't talented is kind of insane. That's kind of that's kind of wild to me because one, this is an A rank jutsu. Two, this is a Genin trying to learn an A rank jutsu that was created by his father, mind you. So like if anybody would have a genetic predisposition to being able to pull off this jutsu, it should be Naruto.
oh my god, bro. No, stop with the genetic predisposition shit. Hagoromo says Naruto didn't have it.
And three, this is a jutsu that took Minato, one of the most talented ninjas, the person who graduated top of the Shinobi Academy, held the record in the Forest of Death, 3 years to create. It took
Create. Very different. Took him a while to create.
No,
the
no,
jutsu.
it took Minato 1 day to create it, 3 years to master it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he did make it in a day in that one shot, yeah.
Yeah.
It took Minato 3 years to create this. It took Jiraiya weeks to be able to learn this. So the fact that Naruto was able to learn this in just a couple of days, which genuinely
I
surprised
don't know how
me,
long it took Jiraiya to learn the fucking
Yeah, I was
Rasengan.
gonna say we're never told that.
capacity whatsoever. Be it a failed capacity, the fact that he was able to make a Rasengan that scared Tsunade in that matter of time does obviously speak to the level of hard work.
Somebody in the chat was like, "Bro, Kakashi had to copy the jutsu to do it." First of all, I don't. Is that true?
Actually, had the Rasengan before he was 9. He
Yeah.
used the he used.
That's
he
what
used Rasengan
Raikiri is.
Chidori.
Yeah, that's what the Raikiri is.
But also at the same time, speaks to the fact that he was born to be able to use the Rasengan.
As he was unable to overcome for years. Rather than accept this, though, because Naruto works backward from the conclusion that he will succeed, he found a workaround and mastered the jutsu anyway, despite the fact that, like I said, he wasn't talented enough to perform it normally. The same thing happened with the Rasen shirt. Combining a nature transformation with the Rasengan was said to be impossible, and Naruto couldn't do it normally, but because of how committed he was, he found a workaround that took advantage of skills he already had. The same thing.
Exactly. Skills that he already had that unfortunately tie their roots back to, you know, things that he was born with. But absolutely, 100% Naruto, why does this happen in Japanese and half English? 100% Naruto works ridiculously hard for everything that he has, using the assets that he has access to. But unfortunately, the assets that he has access to are different from the assets that other people have access to.
Like I said, this doesn't just apply to his approach to learning ninjutsu. Naruto never settles for less than the best outcome he thinks he can achieve no matter what he's doing. He never goes back on his word, you know, that whole thing. Now, this is actually really important, so important that it's arguably the thematic foundation of the entire series. I'm not going to discuss this in as much detail as I could, but one of the concepts explored by the series' first arc, the land
I wonder
of
why
waves,
MC Hammer moved his setup. Like,
Yeah.
it seems like this is a worse spot.
I appreciate that this is no longer the art direction of Naruto, but something about it just brings you down.
of an individual's core philosophy and ideals. Zabuza basically tries to tell Naruto that having greater ambitions beyond the scope of the individual is a privilege not afforded to shinobi. All they should be concerned with is being powerful enough to carry out the orders given to them by people with the resources and influence necessary to make their ambitions a reality. In this case, for example, Kazuna and Gato are using ninja as proxies in an ideological battle to see which of their ambitions come to fruition. And all that really matters is which side has the better ninja.
That's fair. That's a really good point. That's actually a really good summation of the Land of Waves arc. Like, absolutely. Kazuna, Gato both hire ninjas to either get the bridge completed or get the bridge not built. I wouldn't say it's ideological, I'd say it's more financial, but yeah, 100%.
People will treat Naruto saving the world like it was a total layup just because he was powerful, which completely ignores
He like is cutting chunks out of my video for this VOD, which I guess it's for like pacing reasons and stuff, but it makes it hard to keep up with where he's
all
at.
of the non-combat situations he had to successfully navigate to do so. Naruto comes to embody Zabuza Haku's ideal vision of a ninja when he leans on Kurama's power and nearly kills Haku during the battle on the bridge. And like I said during the Ninetales section of the video, Naruto's not supposed to look
That might actually not have been a cut there. Whoops, that might be a whoopsie on my part calling it.
admirable here. He even catches that what he's doing is wrong, that he shouldn't strive to be an emotionless killer focused primarily on his mission objective. This battle with Haku is pretty much completely irrelevant since Kakashi ends up killing him anyway.
I wouldn't say that at all. I wouldn't say this is an irrelevant battle. At the point that Naruto stops his punch, Haku is all but
I'm not
He does have the speed.
okay. I'm not like judging the fucking like okay, I'm judging the setup in the sense that and it's not that I'm tired of Naruto talk because Karthi said like I'm tired of Naruto talk, I'm judging the setup. The setup, like I just noticed the setup is in a generally worse spot than it used to be. Because wherever he was before, he used to have way more, like it was an entire room. But now he's like, because unless he doesn't have a desk right there, which he clearly does, he's triangulated himself into this corner. So he can't move as much. I'm just wondering why.
And the energy to be able to stop a Chidori or I guess a Raikiri from Kakashi, which is very impressive. At this point in time, it was well established that if that fight continued, Naruto would come out victorious. So I don't know if that is, to call it irrelevant is a bit of a stretch just because Haku died elsewhere.
Where Naruto really makes a difference is
I mean, I think the series is even trying to highlight that the fight is meaningless and that Haku's death is meaningless.
in his ideological confrontation with Zabuza, where he forces Zabuza to reconsider the way he treated Haku and his generally simple worldview. Here, Naruto goes well above and beyond what's expected of him. We're even explicitly told that this is outside the scope of his mission objectives, but because what Zabuza's been doing doesn't sit right with him, he feels compelled to do something anyway. The series is full of moments like these, and it's typically through these moments that Naruto most prominently affects the world around him. If Naruto hadn't gotten through to Zabuza or Inari...
I'm struggling to see what this has to do with him being an underdog. Like, I understand, I guess, like, he's
How? What the f- Oh, whatever,
situation
bro.
trying to change the ideology of a career-long assassin? Is that what we're building up here?
and the rest of the residents of the Land of Waves for that matter, he and the rest of Team 7 probably wouldn't have been able to take out Gato and the rest of his thugs when they showed up. To provide some examples from elsewhere in the series, when he fights Neji and Gaara respectively, Naruto tries and succeeds to appeal to their humanity and save them from their cynicism.
Okay, yeah, so what we're building up here is that technically, like, Naruto's always been the underdog of ideological struggles, and that I 100% resonate with. Naruto takes on some of the most difficult battles that one could possibly imagine. He tries to bring Gaara back in from the fold, Zabuza back in from the fold, Nagato back in from the fold. Really?
This fucking Facebook. This is a literal 9-gag meme, bro. This fucking Facebook picture.
The biggest times to me that resonate with the idea of Naruto being an underdog is talk no jutsu moments. Because I don't know if any of you have tried to change somebody's worldview through a conversation. It's a goddamn nightmare. And so Naruto in these moments where he's able to resonate with his enemies and bring them back into the fold with the greatest possible scenario being Naruto breaking the cycle of hatred that's affected the Uchiha because of the Indra and Asura reincarnations for 1,000 years. Like, that is genuinely very impressive. That is one of the most difficult goals that you could possibly set for yourself. So within that capacity, Naruto is 100% underdog.
Okay, yeah, so he agrees. Alright, yeah, he gets it. Alright, he understands.
To talk no jutsu. You can't be born a good talk no jutsu, right? But you can be born strong enough for yourself in that situation to possibly convince that that person to like come to your side. But still, no, absolutely, Swag is right here.
Much of Naruto's success can be traced back to his resolve, force of personality, and thorough commitment to doing what he believes is right. Even as we stay within close proximity of the examples I just gave, Haku opts not to kill him because of a prior interaction they have where Naruto shows how genuine of a kid he is. Neji saves Hinata's life during the battle against Obito and Madara. Gaara, as a result of his interaction with Naruto, grows into a person who's able to act as the linchpin that holds the allied shinobi forces together when it threatens to fall apart. Tsunade takes the position of 5th Hokage, saves Sasuke and Kakashi, and teaches Sakura medical ninjutsu.
So we're saying we're crediting all of this to the influence that Naruto has had on multiple people's lives. Yes, of course, like Nagato literally freely gives his own life to bring the entirety of Konoha that he eviscerated back to life because of what Naruto accomplished. I don't know if that serves to prove that Naruto's been an underdog. I think it serves to prove that his perseverance and his ability to reach people is very impressive. And that like ideologically he always shoots for the furthest and best possible situation. Like Naruto
What I'm saying here is that people attribute Naruto's success to like his genes and this Ashura bullshit, when where it really comes from is the fact that he's like a genuine kid. He doesn't give up. He doesn't waver, like he doesn't compromise on his beliefs. He's always shooting to do the right thing, even when what's right isn't easy. I think that's where his success comes from, and I think he deserves more credit from that. That's what I'm trying to say.
His ideological stance with the world is that he's kind of like an Undertale pacifist run, right? He never wants to kill anybody unnecessarily.
Why are we talking about Undertale?
Which is the best possible scenario.
Also, he's not entirely pacifist, because, I mean, he hit Kakazu with that Rasen Shuriken, and it didn't kill him, but I don't think he would have cared if it did.
Situation for success. And that's actually why the Boruto manga is so interesting right now, because actively Shikamaru as Hokage is rallying against that idea, and that's why I think Boruto is about to absolutely cook up in the manga. This is my go read Boruto tidbit. Anyways, so what Naruto is constantly trying to accomplish is very impressive. From an ideological standpoint, I can't disagree with Swag. Taking on these far-fetched, ridiculously impossible to achieve goals is a wildly, and I mean wildly impressive undertaking that nobody would be an overdog in. But that's not the point that a lot of people online are making about Naruto.
None of this stuff has anything to do with Naruto's genes or any gifts bestowed upon him, and as I discussed earlier, this can't be due to the fact that he was reincarnated from Ashura's soul. Ashura couldn't reach Indra, and Hashirama gave up on Madara. Naruto and Sasuke were, if anything...
No, okay, I understand what he's saying here. He's saying that Naruto's ability to reach these people doesn't tie its roots back to any genetic predisposition or any, like the fact that he's a Asura reincarnation.
Yeah.
That is 100% fair. It truly is, because like I said earlier, there's no genetic predisposition for top-no jutsu. That is absolutely a fundamental of who Naruto is. That is Naruto as a character, and that is his most shining and strongest ability, his ability to reach out to people. But once again, that's not the point that people are making online. But Naruto persevering in the face of overwhelming goals is absolutely a part of Naruto's character throughout the entirety of Naruto. I've never said that Naruto, doesn't have the ability to overcome ridiculously oppressive odds.
Somebody said overdog in chat. Yeah, that is kind of crazy to say.
Saying that his strength and like a lot of the things that he's able to accomplish from a strength perspective come from facets that don't necessarily bring their roots back to hard work.
Aided the battle to the death, but Naruto's compassion and resolve were strong enough to overcome this. In no respect were any of his accomplishments handed to him. They were all hard-earned and came as a result of Naruto consistently giving 100% no matter what he's doing and refusing to compromise on any of his principles.
See, that's why the conversation is murky, right? Because Swag's not wrong there. Swag isn't wrong there at all. 100% everything that Naruto ever accomplished has to do with how hard he worked at it. But also, there's the aspects that, like, he has multi-chakra jutsu, Uzumaki chakra. He's the chosen one, his Asura reincarnation, he's the child of prophecy, he has Minato's father, so on and so forth.
The Yang power he got from Hagoromo came with the acknowledgement that he'd proven he deserved it, and with it, he also inherited the responsibility of saving the world and ending the, up until then, ceaseless cycle of violence between Indra and Ashura. Naruto had to answer for...
You can make that point, you can say that, yes, Naruto got the Yang side of the chakra because he deserved it, but at the same time, Hagoromo...
So, the thing with the Yang side of the chakra is, like, at the time Naruto got it, he was already gonna become Hokage anyway. Like, who the fuck else is there, like, next in line aside from Kakashi? Like, who's stronger than Naruto in the village at the time he gets the Yang power? Like, he got the Yang power out of necessity because he needed to stop Obito and Madara and then later Kaguya. And like you were saying earlier, Six, it's not fair to hold that against him because he was only using it out of necessity against people who were also using unfair bullshit like the fucking Ten Tails, So I don't, like... It's not like Naruto then used the Yang power to, like, bully, like, fucking, like, Kiba out of becoming Hokage or something. It was just, like, a win more ability, And he also had to stop Sasuke, who, as the series constantly tells us, naturally more gifted than him, and also got the Yin power. And not only did he have to stop Sasuke, he had to break the whole cycle of violent shit between... So, like, I think holding the Yang power against him is, like, really stupid. It would be one thing if he was, like, ass before he got it, but he had, like, KCM2... Like, he and Sasuke beat Ten Tails Obito without the Yang power. What do you think, Sid? Like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean... Yeah.
Like, it's like, an advantage, but I don't think it, like, helps him become Hokage,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it helps him save the world, so there's a village to be Hokage of.
But I mean, like you were saying, it's sort of like Sasuke having the curse mark in the Final Valley. It's like...
No, yeah.
You requested it, and we listened. Today, we are going to rank every single game on the Virtual Boy from worst to best. April Fools! Nobody requested this, and we could have just gone the rest of our lives without anyone asking for it. Joke's on you. Or us, I suppose, since we now have to actually play this nonsense.
Marketed as a portable system, the Virtual Boy was far from convenient to play. Essentially, it was a couple of screens on stilts, and you'd press your face against it like you were watching some kind of peep show. Its main selling point was its 3D effect, which did indeed work, but was nowhere near impressive enough to sell the public on its novelty. Not helping matters was its tendency to make players sick. In fact, every Virtual Boy game comes with an automatic pause option, which will stop the game every 15 minutes or so to allow the player's eyes and brain to take a break. That's when you know you've designed a great product.
If the thought of a console that could make you vomit in only a quarter of an hour wasn't horrifying enough, journalists cautioned users against playing it due to concerns about everything from seizures to permanent brain damage. Not really worth a quarter of an hour wasn't horrifying. Horrifying enough, journalists cautioned users against playing it due to concerns about everything from seizures to permanent brain damage. Not really worth the risk so that you can play Mario's tennis, is it? The Virtual Boy died a quick and unmourned death, but how were its games? Did they deserve better than to be buried with the console? We'll look at each of them and find out.
But before we get to the rankings, a few ground rules. Actually, there really aren't that many. The Virtual Boy library is small enough that there's no need to exclude anything. We will only be covering official games, so no homebrew titles, but that's about it for rules. Outside of that, we'll simply be ranking every single Virtual Boy game on a scale of extraordinarily crap to still very much crap, but not as much so. Make sense?
Let's rank them. I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter from Triple Jump, and here is every Virtual Boy game ranked from worst to best.
Number 25, Virtual Lab. In some cases, as you'll see, Virtual Boy games have been unfairly tarnished by the legendary rubbishness of the system itself. Developers did their best, and in at least a few instances actually managed to produce games worth playing. Then, there's Virtual Lab, which single-handedly justifies every ounce of vitriol to ever have been spat at the console. The game consists of dropping bits of intestine into the playing field, which disappear if you manage to cap off both ends. We aren't joking. The game is disgusting. What's more, the controls are sometimes unresponsive and other times too sensitive, with no consistent middle ground. Number 24, SD Gundam Dimension War. It's almost impressive how sluggish and frustrating SD Gundam Dimension War is. It feels at times, and frustrating SD Gundam Dimension War is. It feels at times as though it's been designed as a perfect parody of bad video games, and for that reason alone, it's probably worthy of being called the definitive Virtual Boy title. Nothing about SD Gundam Dimension War is fun, even though it's a game about robots blowing each other up while hurtling through space. How is that possible? Perhaps it's the endless rush of stars that fly toward the camera and are almost impossible to distinguish from projectiles. Perhaps it's the snail's pace at which your robot moves, making it feel more like you're playing as a bin lorry. Or perhaps it's the fact that you and enemies can move into the foreground or background at will, forcing you to chase them back and forth in the hopes that you might accidentally deal damage before they switch planes again. Let's not play SD Gundam Dimension War long enough to decide. Number 23, Waterworld. Waterworld is the only movie tie-in on the Virtual Boy, and in keeping with proud triple jump tradition, nobody involved with the making of this video has seen the film. Somehow we don't think that's a problem, as the game is a simple score attack with no real narrative. You guide a small boat around an almost completely empty map with a number of swimmers in the middle. It's up to you to shoot the approaching bad guys before they make off with anyone. Kidnapped swimmers don't respawn between stages, and the concept isn't light years away from arcade games such as Defender or Donkey Kong 3. Its quality is light years away though, don't get us wrong, but it's, mechanically similar. Ultimately the game lacks variety, the controls are too floaty, and there seems to be hit detection issues, but we can say that its reputation as one of the worst games ever has been exaggerated. You can trust us on that. It's our specialty subject. Number 22, Red Alarm. If you've ever wondered what Star Fox would be like if it were terrible, look no further than Star Fox Zero for the Wii U. If you've ever wondered what Star Fox would be like if it were terrible and also extremely hazardous to your eyes, why not check out Red Alarm? We will tip our hats a bit to developer T&E Soft for at least trying to present the game as a VR experience, something a surprisingly few number of titles even attempted. Then again, Red Alarm is dreadful, so perhaps that's a good thing. 3D vector graphics could have worked well enough if, there were any way of distinguishing between surfaces and the space between them. As designed, Red Alarm overwhelms the player with lines stretching out in every direction. It's the gaming equivalent of walking through a spider's web, but far less fun. Number 21, Virtual Fishing. Virtual Fishing is a fishing game on the Virtual Boy, so the title checks out at least. What it's not, however, is enjoyable in any way, shape or form. To start with the good, the game looks fine. It has something of a confused art design. The fishes look realistic while the humans look cartoony, but this far down the list we'll take what we can get. And that's about all we can say in the game's favour. Virtual Fishing ranks among the simplest of dedicated fishing games, with little more for the player to do than choose a location, cast a line, and reel in some sprites. This is by no means an inherently bad thing, of course, but it does mean Virtual Fishing has nothing unique to offer. Any other fishing game will give you at least as rewarding an experience, and those games won't require you to stick your face into the blindness accelerator that is the Virtual Boy. Number 20, Mario Clash. What is a Nintendo console without Mario? Well, Virtual Boy, almost. The nearest thing we got to a proper Mario game was this reimagining of / spiritual successor to the 1983 Mario Bros. Arcade game. In fact, it was originally envisioned as a direct remake of that game until someone on the development team worried that people might actually enjoy it, at which point it was redesigned immediately. Mario Clash really isn't bad as a time killer. It's the sort of thing we can imagine working well on mobile phones or as a downloadable 3DS title for quick bursts of forgettable play. But as a retail release, it lacks pretty much everything. It's a very basic score attack game that doesn't save your high scores, and it features 99 levels without the ability to pick up where you left off. Interesting design choices, Nintendo. It would have been cheaper to just post everyone who bought a Virtual Boy a letter that says, "We don't like you." Number 19, 3D Tetris. The 1989 version of Tetris was a system seller for the Game Boy. It was a pack-in, yes, but it was also the reason so many people had to own the system. It immediately sold consumers on the unique features of Nintendo's new handheld. In 1996, 3D Tetris could have done the same thing for the Virtual Boy, if either of those things were good. One of the reasons Tetris took off the way it did was its simplicity. Slot pieces into places to create lines. Easy. 3D Tetris, by contrast, is much more complicated and far more difficult to explain. It's sort of like Tetris, only it's in 3D. The screen keeps shifting and you need to create layers rather than lines. And the blocks are more complex, both in terms of how to fit them into others and how to control them. And different difficulties give you different blocks, and you get the idea. Ultimately though, the problem is that 3D Tetris just isn't any fun. It takes a long time to get used to, and that's time you could spend doing something more productive, like returning 3D Tetris for a full refund.
Number 18, Mario's Tennis. That's Mario's Tennis, not Mario Tennis. When we think about Mario sports games today, we think of things like Super Mario Kart, Mario Superstar Baseball, or even Super Smash Bros. Basically, games that take the visceral thrill of an event and pair it with fun, accessible mechanics the whole family can enjoy, which makes revisiting Mario's Tennis an odd experience. Admittedly, it predated most Mario sports games, but it's very strange to see Nintendo stick its mascot into a sporting event that isn't fun. Mario's Tennis is almost shockingly dull. Move your character and press a button to knock the ball over the net. Repeat until dead. It's serviceable, but it's really not engaging at all. On the bright side, the character sprites look great, and the game actually takes advantage of the Virtual Boy's sense of depth. On the stranger side, Nintendo included 7 characters in the game. Not 6, not 8, but 7, meaning there's always an odd man out in tournaments. If we didn't know better, we'd suspect their heart wasn't in this one. Number 17, Vertical Force. Perhaps unexpectedly, Vertical Force would have been a much better game if it hadn't tried to do anything interesting. On its surface, it's a simple, vertically scrolling space shooter. You blast away at enemies and try to avoid projectiles. Standard stuff. It works fine and is pretty responsive. It falls apart, however, in what was surely intended to be its most impressive feature. The action unfolds on 2 planes, the background and the foreground. You can move freely between them to avoid hazards or to engage enemies. The problem is, though, that it's never easily clear, as Father Dougal would no doubt sympathise, whether something is small or far away. The Virtual Boy's simulated depth only helps so much. Without already having the reference point of how big a particular enemy, obstacle or projectile is meant to be, it's extremely difficult to know which plane it's on. This is especially problematic in a fast-paced genre such as this one, and it's a gimmick that actively works against the gameplay experience. Oh dear. Number 16, Galactic Pinball. If there's one thing you absolutely need before you call your game pinball, it's, well, a pinball. Galactic Pinball, for whatever reason, instead features a puck. And we're not just being snarky about the graphics, the game does actually refer to it as a puck. What is a puck doing in a pinball machine? Lord knows, but it would probably rather be anywhere other than in Galactic Pinball. While previews of the game spoke positively about its physics back when the game was called Space Pinball, still pinball, the released and renamed version altered those physics heavily, presumably so nobody would accidentally enjoy playing it. It is impossible to predict how the puck will move, and it seems to have the ability to slow down and speed up of its own volition. It says a lot when a pinball game on the NES was more creative, more fun, and contained far superior physics than this. 15 years after the release of Galactic Pinball, the Nintendo DS became the home to Galactic Tazball. It's not related to this game in any way whatsoever, I just wanted to say Galactic Tazball. Let's move on. Number 15, Virtual League Baseball. Virtual League Baseball is about as bare bones as a game can get. It does indeed allow you to play baseball, but without interesting mechanics or opportunities to develop any kind of nuance or strategy. Essentially, the game is simplified to the point of it not being worth playing. It doesn't even look especially good, going for an ill-advised realistic approach when cartoony graphics suited the system far better. Throughout the entire game, unrelated surf rock spirals out of control on the soundtrack, but the developers mercifully provided an option to switch it off in favour of golden silence. The pace of the game is also irritatingly slow, making the experience feel far less thrilling than any sport ever should. But with the exception of bowls, obviously, where a complete lack of thrills is the whole point. Oh god! Oh no, we stand corrected! Oh, sorry, Virtual League Baseball, you're bottom of the pile. Number 14, Dragon Hopper. Every console has its share of unreleased games, titles that were developed and sometimes even finished, but never made it to shelves. This is certainly true of the Virtual Boy, which had a lifespan of only 5 months in Japan. That's not much time for a developer to build a game from scratch and get it into stores, which means a large number of games intended for the console were simply never finished. Dragon Hopper, though, may well have been complete. It was far enough along to at least warrant an advertisement, though it was an admittedly vague one. Screenshots and demo footage were also released to stir up a bit of hype for the title, and sure enough, previews were optimistic, not least because it was being developed by Intelligent Systems, a talented developer best known today for series such as Fire Emblem and WarioWare. Sadly, we can't say much about Dragon Hopper because the ROM has yet to surface, so why have we ranked it above all the other entries so far? Well, because not playing this game was more fun than playing all those others. Ho 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 ho! Good times had by all. Number 13, Space Invaders Virtual Collection. To be clear, Space Invaders as we know it is a better game than anything that came near the Virtual Boy, including everything remaining in this video. But this specific version was never going to reach the classic status of the arcade original. For starters, this release contains the absolute smallest number of games that could possibly be called a collection. 2. At least 3 other official Space Invaders games had come out by this time, but they just weren't represented here for some reason. Each game does have a 3D mode, slanting the action towards the background, but it honestly doesn't look much better than the original games did 2 decades prior. The 3D mode also makes it look like the aliens are marching towards you rather than descending from space, you know, like in the title. On the bright side, if you have a copy of this game, you can cash it in for a pretty penny. It's one of the rarest Virtual Boy games out there, and proof that fans of the system, wherever they are willing to put up with almost anything. Number 12, Panic Bomber. Bomberman on the Virtual Boy could have worked quite well. The overhead view would have spotlighted the unit's capability for simulated depth, and the simplicity of the sprites and gameplay would have overcome the system's graphical limitations. Instead, though, the Virtual Boy received a port of Bomberman Panic Bomber with the Bomberman name removed. It's a falling block puzzler, and a good one, to be fair. It features between-match banter with quirky enemies similar to Puyo Puyo, and is without question a fully competent and serviceable game. But it in no way took advantage of the Virtual Boy's unique features. In fact, it had already appeared on at least 5 consoles, none of which featured 3D, and all of which featured, colours. Frankly, Panic Bomber is the worst version of a good game, which we suppose is all that can be reasonably hoped for with a Virtual Boy title.
Number 11, Nestor's Funky Bowling. Thanks to Wii Sports, there is an entire generation of gamers who will forever associate Nintendo with bowling games. Nestor's Funky Bowling did not have quite the same impact on the Virtual Boy generation. Of course, that's mainly because no human being before me has ever used the words virtual and boy and generation in the same sentence. It is, however, a decent bowling game. Also, true to its title, it has a genuinely funky soundtrack. Unfortunately, once you've mastered the timing, which shouldn't take more than a few frames, you've mastered the entire game. There are practice and challenge modes, but all those really do is help to teach you that timing. Nintendo Power counted it as among the best games on the system, which might seem like a biased opinion, as Nestor originated as a character within that magazine's comic strips, but ultimately, they were correct. Nestor's Funky Bowling is a perfectly competent game on a system where competency is a genuine selling point. Number 10, Nico-chan Battle. You probably won't recognize the name Nico-chan Battle, but you might know it as Faceball 2000. The title suggests that this Virtual Boy version of the game would have stayed in Japan, but it actually didn't even get that far. It was cancelled and remained unreleased and unplayable until a ROM leaked in 2013. Not that we think Nico-chan Battle would have saved the Virtual Boy, of course, but a first-person shooter such as this certainly did far more to show off the console's features than anything that actually made it to stores. The Game Boy version already impressed critics in 1991, so a version with a true 3D feel and actual depth would have been nice. Playing it today, Nico-chan Battle is not likely to impress, but at the time, it had a real shot at giving the Virtual Boy a reason to exist. Number 9. V-Tetris. Hands up if you think the Virtual Boy needs a second version of Tetris. No? Nobody? Right, well, here's one anyway. V-Tetris was one of the system's Japan-exclusive titles, and it's much more faithful to the Tetris formula than the one that came to the West. 3 game modes are available. 2 of them, an endless mode and a level-based mode, will be familiar to anyone who has ever played Tetris, a group so large we think it might actually include people who died hundreds of years before Tetris was even invented. The 3rd mode is the only one that takes advantage of the Virtual Boy's unique charms, and it's also where things get interesting. In this mode, you can rotate the playing field. Think of it like turning a cylinder by using the L and R buttons. It's not an easy concept to get used to, but it's a legitimately interesting way of making V-Tetris stand out from other versions of the game. Number 8. Space Squash. In addition to having the most delicious sounding title of any Virtual Boy game, Space Squash is also one of the system's best. Faint praise, we know, but it's surprisingly addictive for such a simple game. Calling it Squash probably did the game even fewer favours than releasing it on the Virtual Boy ever did. The game has very little to do with Squash outside of a few wall-based sequences, and instead sees you engaging in a deadly game of explosive tennis with angry robots. We defy you to come up with a worse title for that premise than Space Squash. The game introduces a number of wrinkles throughout to keep you on your toes, but you can earn power-ups to turn things back to your advantage. It's a fun enough game, and it manages to elicit that just one more go feeling better than anything else on the system. Number 7. Innsmouth no Yakata. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. For a console that rendered everything in the colour of viscera, there's a surprising lack of horror in the Virtual Boy library. Innsmouth no Yakata, or House of Innsmouth, although it really doesn't matter because the game never got an English language release, aimed to fill that gap. Is it good? No. No, it is not good, but it does get a lot of points for effort. The game sees you exploring a haunted mansion in the 1920s, besieged by monsters inspired by the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. That description probably brings to mind Alone in the Dark. Not that one! That one. And sure enough, Innsmouth no Yakata, which released 3 years after Alone in the Dark, does feel like a pale imitation. It's not all bad. 3 years after Alone in the Dark does feel like a pale imitation. It's not all bad though. The first-person perspective is a natural fit for the system, and the fact that you need to have your eyes so close to the screen can make the sudden appearance of monsters that much scarier. It's a better concept than a game, but still, what a concept.
Number 6. Virtual Boy Wario Land. Bring up the Virtual Boy library to enough people and you'll eventually hear, well, Wario Land was good at least. Or perhaps, Wario Land deserved better. Or maybe even, why'd you keep asking people about the Virtual Boy library? We hate to break it to you, but Virtual Boy Wario Land isn't actually that good. Don't get us wrong, it's better than nearly anything else on the system, but by the standard of, actual decent games, it comes up well. The system isn't actually that good. Don't get us wrong, it's better than nearly anything else on the system, but by the standard of, actual decent games, it comes up well short. It plays like the first Wario Land for the Game Boy, which makes sense because that was the only other Wario Land game released at that point. But the series didn't really develop into something special until the games that followed, leaving this to be little more than a platformer with a sluggish hero. It's also very short. The game, I mean, not the hero. Well, I don't know, maybe both. There are only 14 stages, 4 of which are basically just boss fights. Now, the first Wario game had 40 stages, illustrating how slight an offering this is. Granted, you'll be vomiting into a bucket well before you finish level 5, so the actual length of the game is moot, but we thought it was worth mentioning all the same. Number 5, Bound High. At Famicom Space World 95, Nintendo's then president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, announced Bound High as, quote, the most promising title on the virtual Famicom Space World 95. Number 5, Bound High. At Famicom Space World 95, Nintendo's then president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, announced Bound High as, quote, the most promising title on the Virtual Boy. As with all of the Virtual Boy's promise, though, this went unmet, as Bound High was never released. This is actually disappointing, as Bound High was indeed a fun game, easily superior to most of the console's library. It's an action puzzler that relies on the system's simulated depth. You control Chalvo, a robot who can compress himself into a sphere, and it's your job to avoid hazards and vanquish enemies as you bounce through tricky stages. Bound High actually began as software for correcting eyesight, so its development into a game that was genuinely fun and anticipated was a pleasant surprise. Mercifully, it's playable now thanks to leaked ROMs, but sadly, it never made it to stores. Chalvo did, however, go on to star in 1997's Chalvo 55 on the Game Boy. That game is nearly as obscure as Bound High, but hey, at least it was actually released. Number 4, Virtual Bowling. Virtual Bowling is, hold on to your hats, another bowling game, and it's one without a fraction of the charm or creativity of Nestor's Funky Bowling. And yet it is still by far the superior experience. Virtual Bowling was designed by Athena, a company that had already developed bowling games for the NES, SNES, and Game Boy. They developed plenty of other games as well, but by the time they got to Virtual Bowling, it was safe to say that these guys knew how to make a bowling game. As a result, Virtual Bowling has more technique and nuance than most bowling titles, which we think is a very good thing, showing off just how polished the game actually is. As you've seen, polish of any kind is a rarity for this system, and Athena deserves credit for putting genuine craftsmanship into what could have been yet another throwaway title. Could have really split the crowd there. Oh Lord, spare us that. Okay, I'll stop now. Number 3, Teleroboxer. The only Virtual Boy game we'd like to see become a series, Teleroboxer has a lot of promise. It's a silly boxing game that sees you beating 7 shades of red, it has to be red, out of your opponent as you each control a giant robot. Think Rock'em Sock'em robots with the mechanics of Punch-Out, and you've got it. It also serves as a good introduction to how other games could have better utilised this system. Controlling the action with a D-pad in each hand and your face against a visor goes a long way towards making you feel like you're actually sitting inside your mechanical fighter. It's not an easy game, truly the Dark Souls of Virtual Boy sci-fi robot boxing titles, which means you won't get much out of it if you don't take the time to master it, but it's certainly a great concept that deserved a better chance to shine. Number 2, Golf. Nintendo's consoles have been home to a number of great golf games throughout the years. Golf on the Virtual Boy is not the best of them. That honor goes to Mario Golf World Tour on the 3DS, because I'm sure you were dying to know. But it is honestly quite good. It controls well, and its 18 courses are decently designed. Also, you can play any of them whenever you like. This makes it perfect for the brief play sessions necessary to keep the Virtual Boy from blowing your head apart like that guy in Scanners. Where it falls down is in its Virtual Boy specific features, such as a colour scheme that makes it look like you're golfing in the depths of hell. Not really something that could have been avoided by the developers, but pretty grim all the same. The menus and shot gauges are also arranged as 3-dimensional rings, obviously intended to show off the Virtual Boy's defining feature. All it really does though is make them a little more difficult to use. However, putting all that aside, this is genuinely a pretty solid game.
Number 1, Jack Bros. We don't have time in a list like this to get into just how weird a history Jack Bros has. We will say, however, that it's a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series, the series that ultimately found worldwide acclaim for its Persona games, and is the very first of those titles to be released outside of Japan. That's right, the Western introduction of what would become one of gaming's most beloved highlights was on the Virtual Boy.
Jack Bros doesn't play anything like Shin Megami Tensei or Persona though. It's an action game with a dash of problem solving. You can play as 4 different characters, the titular Jack Bros and an unlockable pixie, all of whom will be recognisable to Shin Megami Tensei and Persona fans today. Your goal is to guide your character through a series of descending levels, solving navigation puzzles and fighting bosses.
And it's actually fun. Jack Bros is a well-designed game with some genuinely great ideas. It very much deserves a remake, especially with the rise of download-exclusive budget games, and we genuinely hope it gets one. That's something you'll never hear anyone say about Red Alarm or Virtual Lab.
So there we have it. That's every Virtual Boy game ranked from worst to best. As in,
Guaranteed people have said that about Red Alarm.
Want to eat well while staying on a budget? Practice these tips. Keep an eye out for more tips on how to shop smarter with help from Hannaford.
Apparently you can spell funky without F-U-N on Virtual Boy Works episode 12. So we're already winding down the US Virtual Boy lineup, a mere 12 episodes into this whole endeavor. As nice as it would have been for Virtual Boy to have gone out on a high note, I'm sorry to say that wasn't the case. Hot on the heels of the interesting but far from wonderful Waterworld, we have the final Nintendo first-party creation for the platform, Nestor's Funky Bowling. It's not a particularly good game, but it's definitely one of the oddest first-party Nintendo releases ever, so I suppose that counts for something. For starters, this is another one of those rare works that was designed, in part, at a Nintendo internal studio in Japan, but only ever released in the US. Not surprisingly, the game appears to come to us from the dev group behind another notable American-exclusive Nintendo duology, the Star Tropics series. That is, Nintendo R&D 3. Headed up by Genyo Takeda, R&D group behind released in the US. Not surprisingly, the game appears to come to us from the dev group behind, so I suppose that counts for something. For starters, this is another one of those rare works that was designed, in part, at a Nintendo internal studio in Japan, but only ever released in the US. Not surprisingly, the game appears to come to us from the dev group behind another notable American-exclusive Nintendo duology, the Star Tropics series. That is, Nintendo R&D 3. Headed up by Genyo Takeda, R&D 3 focused primarily on hardware and peripherals and didn't make a lot of games. But when they did, those software projects were almost always geared toward the US market. Takeda created a huge arcade hit in the US with the original Punch-Out! I suppose the corporate thinkers decided, well, you seem to get what makes our biggest foreign market tick, so congrats, you're now our America guy. In this case, R&D 3 didn't venture alone into the strange world of virtual 10-pins. Here, they teamed up with a fledgling studio called Sapphire, based out of Utah. Sapphire did the heavy lifting on Nestor's Funky Bowling. It was one of their very first projects that wasn't simply a conversion of an existing creation. But yeah, it's an odd little game. I mean, the concept isn't so weird. The Virtual Boy's 3D tech is all about parallax visualization based on relative distances. So a game in which you're chucking a ball down a fixed lane at distant objects makes perfect sense. In fact, it made such perfect sense that no less than 2 games in the Virtual Boy's library of fewer than 24 games involve bowling, as we'll see down the road. It's entirely possible that no other console ever made has as high a percentage of bowling games by volume as Virtual Boy. And this is a competent take on the sport, if not a spectacular one. Nestor's Funky Bowling offers 3 modes. There's a practice mode that allows you to perfect your rolls for pretty much every pin arrangement permutation imaginable. And there's a challenge mode that shuffles those various pin scenarios into a running contest. The meat of the game, of course, is a standard bowling contest. You have 10 frames, 10 pins, and 2 rolls per frame. You can choose one of 2 on-screen avatars, male or female, select one of 9 different ball weights, and choose the dominant arm of your bowler. The weight of the ball makes an appreciable difference to its performance. Lighter balls are more likely to spin or stall, while heavier balls roll forward with less variance. The act of bowling itself plays out here with the use of meters, similar to a golf sim. This is how it worked in World League Bowling for Game Boy, and it's how it works here. You have a lateral slider to determine the angle from which you approach the lane, and a power slider to determine the force with which you release the ball. There are no surprises to be found in this setup if you have ever watched any of the Works episodes featuring a golf or bowling game. Sapphire stuck to the basics. The one unusual play feature of Nestor's Funky Bowling is that you can choose to hit either face button, A or B, to determine the direction in which you spin the ball. There's not really a roll it dead straight option so far as I can tell. The interaction between button and the direction of the English you put on the ball is actually somewhat counterintuitive in my opinion. The ball rotates in the opposite direction of the button you press to release it. This takes a little getting used to, but once you have a handle on the situation, you can score well pretty consistently. The scoring system here uses standard bowling rules in the basic tournament mode. You get 1 point for each pin you knock down, plus the points you earn in the frame following a spare, and the 2 frames following a strike. So far, so mundane, right? What makes Nestor's funky bowling such an oddity, though, is right there in the title. Not that it's funky, but the fact that it's a game starring Nestor. There are a lot of reasons it's really bizarre for Nintendo to have created a game starring Nestor, but foremost among them is that the character had been retired for nearly 2 years by the time this game shipped. Nestor, for those of you who didn't follow Nintendo obsessively during the NES era, was a character who debuted in the pages of Nintendo Power magazine. Nestor was a fictional kid who starred opposite a cartoon version of real-life Nintendo employee Howard Phillips in the Howard and Nestor comics. Phillips in real life was basically the luckiest kid in the world, having been elevated to a position of glory as Nintendo of America's internal playtester at the dawn of the NES era.
Oh, this guy.
Phillips in real life Nintendo employee Howard Phillips in the Howard and Nestor comics. Phillips in real life was basically the era was a character who debuted in the pages of Nintendo Power magazine. Nestor was a fictional kid who starred opposite a cartoon version of real-life Nintendo employee Howard Phillips in the Howard and Nestor comics. Phillips in real life was basically the luckiest kid in the world, having been elevated to a position of glory as Nintendo of America's internal playtester at the dawn of the NES era. As a so-called expert player, Phillips is reputed to have had significant sway over NOA's localization decisions. Legend has it that Phillips had a prominent role in the decision not to bring Super Mario Bros. 2 for Famicom over to the US, resulting in the frankly superior Doki Doki Panic for Disk System having been repurposed for that role instead. In any case, Nintendo Power magazine featured a full-page, sometimes two-page comic starring Phillips, which amounted to a glorified tips and tricks feature. Phillips' avatar appeared opposite a snotty little punk named Nestor, a know-it-all twerp whose cocksure incompetence invariably landed him into unpleasant situations. Although I guess it's a little weird in hindsight that this Goofus and Gallant style comic featured a grown man dunking repeatedly on a little kid, it somehow worked at the time. Probably because Nestor represents a variety of obnoxious doofus we've all known at one time or another. In short, Nestor was an unlikable, toxic little shit who only worked because he existed as a foil to the good-natured dork that was Howard Phillips. As Nintendo Power's editors quickly discovered once Phillips left the company, they attempted to carry on the comic with just Nestor, an unlikable, obnoxious doofus we've all known at one time or another. In short, Nestor was an unlikable, toxic little shit who only worked because he existed as a foil to the good-natured dork that was Howard Phillips. As Nintendo Power's editors quickly discovered once Phillips left the company, they attempted to carry on the comic with just Nestor, and the result was utterly disastrous and was phased out within the year. But somehow, despite all of this, Nintendo said, yes, our final tentpole release for Virtual Boy should be a game about this defunct character no one actually likes. Honestly, this whole thing rates right up there with Waterworld in terms of a game representing a perfect synecdoche for the entirety of Virtual Boy's existence. In terms of gameplay, Nestor's presence honestly doesn't matter. He's just a dude who bowls, and his female counterpart, his twin sister Hester, made up for this game, amounts to a tiny and trivial nod to inclusivity. So what do Nestor and Hester accomplish here besides put a character who would have been vaguely familiar to Nintendo fans on the box art? Well, they serve as punching bags, basically. When you bowl anything less than a perfect strike, you're treated to an animation of your avatar having a minor meltdown. Me, when I bowl, I'm happy to end up with any result that isn't a split or a gutter ball. But if Nestor or Hester missed a single pin, they respond with anything from a look of disbelief to a sudden onset of alopecia. Occasionally, you'll see random animations that don't involve the main characters. What all these images have in common is that they're kind of weird, and they're all drawn a bit amateurishly. So, basically in summary, Nintendo dredged up a failed character from a defunct feature in its in-house propaganda magazine to star in a bowling game for its failed semi-portable console, specifically for the sake of kicking him around when players failed to bowl perfectly. Frankly, I can't imagine a more inexplicable licensing decision, or a more fitting capstone to the Virtual Boy.
Guess that's it. Jeez, man. Do I want to get into Red Alarm now, or am I tired? Maybe I'll brush my teeth and see how I feel, but I don't know. Might be valuable to end it here. Oh, fuck, I'm tired. So, I mean, I didn't really sleep much, so there's that. So maybe I should really just fucking rage quit. While I'm tired, I don't know. Feeling tired. Yeah, that might be it for me, sadly. What's going on? The music. Do they have headphones on the Virtual Boy? I just said like earbud things, I don't know. Seems expensive.